Licensed games. Licensed games everywhere. We all know their reputation. Games made that can have little to nothing to do with the movie or show and made for a quick buck. This practice has been going on since the NES era with a lot of meh to terrible licensed games. However, some of them have slipped through the cracks and have actually become classics in this generation. Games like Batman and The Goonies 2 have gained quite a following and are listed among some of the best games on the system. But we're forgetting about one subgenre of licensed games that was truly amazing, and made by Capcom. That is, the Disney Afternoon games. Starting with the game Mickey Mousecapade, originally developed by Hudson Soft and published by Capcom, they've handled almost every Disney game on the NES, most of which being based off shows during Disney's 2-hour television block, the Disney Afternoon. During this animation block, many shows premiered and got their own games such as Darkwing Duck, Tailspin, and Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. There was one though that quite possibly changed the entire landscape of television animation and licensed games as we know it, and that is Ducktales. If you have not seen or at least heard of the show, it's based off Scrooge McDuck and Donald Duck's three nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, going on adventures searching for riches, stopping villains who have mostly tried to steal Scrooge's wealth like the Beagle Boys and Magica De Spell, and forgetting about the fact Donald joined the US Navy.
I mean, at some point Donald was a Nazi, so, do what you want with that information.
Anyways, being based off the Donald Duck comics by Carl Barks, the series did incredibly well, running for 4 seasons with 100 episodes, a feature-length movie, and a spin-off series, that being Darkwing Duck, and a reboot in 2017 that was freaking amazing. Like seriously, if you haven't had the chance, go watch it ASAP. But why am I talking about all this? Well, in 1989, Capcom released a tie-in game from the Nintendo Entertainment System to raving reviews and is now considered one of the greatest games on the system. Not only that, it was remade in 2013 for the Xbox 360, PS3, Wii U, and PC, and was another success. And this is what I'm going to be covering today. Is Ducktales Remastered the best way to experience this NES classic, or is this just another cash grab on 80s nostalgia? Well, let's start with the original and go over what made the original such a classic. Ducktales was developed by Capcom and much of the same team that worked on the first Mega Man game, including Keiji Inafune as character designer and Takuro Fujiwara as producer. The game was a commercial success, being incredibly well received at the time and even today is regarded as one of the best games on the NES. The game was also ported to Game Boy and got a sequel a few years later. The story of the game is relatively simple and is pretty much the basis for a lot of episodes in the original TV series. Scrooge McDuck, seeking to increase his fortune, decides to try to find and collect 5 different treasures across the globe and even in space itself to become the richest duck in the world. Along the way, various baddies will try to stop Scrooge like the Beagle Boys, Magica De Spell, and Flintheart Glungle. Luckily, Scroogey has allies helping him on his adventure. His nephews, technically great nephews but we're not going to get into that right now, Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Webby all appear giving you some tips on hidden routes and treasures in the stages and just overall information you could probably figure out yourself. Launchpad McQuack can also be found and he can take you out of the stage if needed. And Mrs. Beakley, who also barrages you with health pickups in the form of ice cream and cake. To get these treasures, Scrooge travels to their 5 unique locations: the Amazon, Transylvania, the African mines, the Himalayas, and even the moon. Each area feels so incredibly distinct, whether it be their stage layouts, their distinct designs, and even down to the enemies themselves. Transylvania has many skeleton ducks and ghosts try to attack you, the Himalayas have many mountain goats, hockey ducks, and snow rabbits, the Amazon has many gorillas, bees, and snakes, and so on and so forth. The stages also have lots of gems to find to increase your wealth, and alternate passageways to get more treasure. The best part is that they're all really well designed and pretty easy to navigate without getting lost. But how does Mr. McD get around all these enemies and obstacles? Well, with his trusty cane, of course. While it can't be used to beat your enemies senseless, it's good for hitting boxes and other objects to get forward, or to take out enemies you can't by normal means. Treasure chests can also be found, which when struck will either pop a sweet for your health, an extra life, or what you'll mainly find, gems. The cane can also be used by holding down and B to pogo around. It can take a little bit to get used to how it feels, but it isn't difficult to learn and will be picked up rather quickly. This is one of the most fun things to do in any video game, and it's so damn satisfying to bonk enemies on the noggin with the pogo cane. Sadly, in the Himalayas, using the cane in the snow will cause you to sink in it. Throughout the stages, you'll find a spot or two that will test your platforming skill with the pogo stick, and it may either lead to hidden treasure, or just act as a neat shortcut through the level. Unfortunately, sometimes if you catch the very edge of a platform, you'll dismount your cane and can either just stop you from progressing for a second, or cause you to fall to your death. The game also likes to throw you a curveball in the levels from time to time. For example, in the moon stage, you have to try to find a remote control to gain control of Gizmo Duck to blow up the path for you that will lead you to the stage's treasure. To get into the mines, you need to go back into Transylvania to try to find a key. But this also becomes a weak point when you have to go back to Transylvania again for the final level where you fight the last of DuckTales' underwhelming boss battles. Every boss in the game follows the same formula of needing to be bonked on the head a few times before you secure the treasure of the area. Most are all iconic characters from the original show too, like Magica De Spell and Flimheart Glomgle, while some are unique to the game such as the Lunar Rat and Dracula Duck. What do we do with all this treasure though? Well, as it is fun to collect, sadly it doesn't really do anything besides influence the game's ending. If you collect nothing, it'll end with Scrooge being more depressed than me after seeing TikTok pickup artists.
Well, all I want for Christmas is you.
How sweet!
So get on your knee, bitch.
Whoa!
However, if you collect over $10 million in-game, you'll have Scrooge being happier than Jared Fogle at a high school pep rally. There are also 2 hidden treasures in the game to collect, so if you want to increase your fortune even more, there you go. To help you keep going, because sometimes this game can get a little difficult, you can also find 2 additional health pickups that'll extend your life bar. If you also want more or less of a challenge, Ducktales offers 3 different difficulty levels that only affect how much health you start out with and nothing more. After collecting all 5 treasures of each area, all of them end up being stolen from you abruptly. Now you have to head back into Transylvania for a 3rd time to fight the final boss of the game, Dracula Duck. I'm gonna be frank with you, I really don't like how Transylvania is used 3 times in this game and it just comes off as lazy. It's not a deal breaker or anything, but just comes off as a little le stupide. It's here where you can also fight the final boss of the game, Dracula Duck, who is pretty pathetic. After one last rope climb race against Glomgold and Magica, and gathering the last treasure, Scrooge remains the richest duck in the world, ending the game. Ducktales is a really nice game for the NES. It's a relatively short adventure that takes less than an hour to complete, but it still happens to be a really fun one. It's also a really good example of what a good licensed game can be. A nice tie-in with the original property that feels like you're actually playing through an episode of the show or the movie. And that's what Ducktales does. Allows you to solve mysteries and in tune with the theme, rewrite history. The soundtrack is also the stuff of legends. Some of the most iconic pieces on the system, and even the Moon theme ended up making it into the 2017 reboot.
If you haven't already, I recommend you check out this game. It's available on the Disney Afternoon Collection for PS4, Xbox One, and Steam, along with all the other Disney Afternoon games. Now, it's time to see what Ducktales Remastered did to improve the original experience and bring this 8-bit classic to a new generation.
Released in 2013, Ducktales Remastered received quite a number of changes to the game, but it's still the same game through and through. For starters, the graphical quality this time goes for a hand-drawn cartoon art style, and it's beautiful. The animation is so fluid and expressive while still staying true to the original show. The 2.5D levels also fit the character surprisingly well, and it doesn't come off as uncanny. The art direction was actually done by Mike Pizzera and Rick Evans, who contributed to films like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Aladdin. To add to the presentation, the remaining voice cast from the original show ended up making a return, like Alan Young, June Foray, Rusty Taylor, etc. And they sound as great as ever.
Magic and dispel. Ach, I should have known you'd be behind this.
Oh, Scroogey, my old friend, you wouldn't believe how much fun it is watching you run around making a fool of yourself.
Speaking of animation, the game adds a lot more story. Every level opens and ends with a cutscene explaining what they're doing there and adding more details to the game to really make it feel like an episode of the original show. Remastered also adds 2 or more stages to the game to make the story flow better. The game starts out with the Beagle Boys raiding Scrooge's money bin, and after going through a tutorial-like stage, Scrooge, Huey, Dewey, and Louie find a treasure map showing where the 5 treasures are located. The stages now all play slightly differently as well. Most are requiring you to collect X amount of items to access Y. If anything, I like this change as it encourages players to more thoroughly search the levels for treasure to increase your fortune, which we'll get into in a bit. In the Amazon, you now have to collect 8 coins to access the temple and defeat the boss. There's also a nice little nod to the original game here, where if you destroy the statue, you get $30,000 and an achievement named Score to Settle. In the original game, the statue asks you to pay that amount of money to progress, but you could just pogo on an enemy instead. In Transylvania, you actually have to find Huey, Dewey, and Louie and go to where the hidden treasure used to be to find Magic and a spell, where you then go off and fight her. The African Mines has had a major improvement, and now you no longer have to backtrack to Transylvania to find the skeleton key. Now, it's just located in the actual stage. In the Himalayas, Scrooge now has to try to find 3 pieces of Launchpad's fuel regulator. Bubba Duck's cameo is now more expanded, and a new part of the level is added. And even a mini-boss with Glomgold is added. The moon hasn't changed much, but now there's a short anti-gravity section. Gizmo Duck has to be collected via 3 parts of his suit instead of just a remote control in the original. Also, by the way, one of the pieces is located again where the hidden treasure used to be in the original. And a real explanation for why Scrooge and Co. can actually breathe on the goddamn moon.
Sorta natural. Now, Gyro, why in blazes are we chewing this awful blue muck?
Why, that's Oxy Chew, Mr. McDuck. It's my latest invention, oxygen-flavored taffy. 5 good chews and you can breathe on the lunar surface without a spacesuit. Oh, and it tastes great, too.
Fun fact, the Oxy Chew was actually brought back in the 2017 reboot.
Ugh, black licorice!
After collecting the 5 treasures, again they are stolen. However, this time you actually don't have to head back to Transylvania again to fight the final boss.
Instead, Scrooge travels to an entire new level, Mount Vesuvius, which is a real volcano in Italy. The stage also has Glomgold travel with you throughout, which better explains why he and Magica are at the climb at the end. After a more difficult climb to reach Scrooge's #1 dime, rhymed, the game actually doesn't end there, but instead gives you another climb while trying to avoid rising lava. I don't know if this is just my controller here, but I just want to mention, I swear, sometimes I couldn't grab these chains, which resulted in my death multiple times and even a game over, so yeah, just be careful. The game's ending is very similar to the original, with Scrooge remaining the richest duck in Duckburg, and even ends like an actual episode of the cartoon.
Now there's a sight I never get tired of. Come on, lads, let's head to the ice cream shop.
Hey, can we each get our own cone this time, Uncle Scrooge?
Oh, why not? I'm in a generous mood today. In fact, each of you can even get a cone with ice cream in it.
Now for some more gameplay changes. Starting with the control, it controls very faithfully to the original, except for the use of Scrooge's pogo cane. The cane has much better flow and control to it. Instead of pressing down and B like in the original, it's just pressing the action button in mid-air to mount the cane, which is a nice change. If you are a fan of the original way though, it can be selected in the options menu. The hidden treasures from the original have been removed to make way for the key story items, however they are still available if you play on the hardest difficulty. Speaking of difficulty, on the easiest difficulty, players are now given infinite lives, which is nice for beginners. Mrs. Beakley now gives you one of each health item instead of just ice cream everywhere. It's kinda redundant how she still gives you ice cream even though she also gives you a cake now, which restores all your health anyway. It's kinda like if someone offered you to give you $10 or $1, I mean you just take the 10. But, I digress. Stages, like I said earlier, are now more expanded, offering things like mini-bosses and more areas to explore for more treasure. I actually really like how these new objectives encourage players to search the levels for more treasure. But you may be wondering, what's the point of collecting all this treasure if there's nothing to use it on? The other endings from the original are gone too, so there's even less of a point, right? Right? Wrong. With all the money you collect from the stages, you can actually now spend it in the gallery and unlock some cool stuff like concept art and even art from the original show. It's just something extra that serves as even more of a love letter to the original source material. I don't know about you, but seeing all these sketches, designs, and scenes really just show how much the team behind it cared, and I can't applaud them enough. You know what else is cool? In the options menu, if you want, you can actually have the original NES soundtrack play throughout the entire game. There's even new NES-style remixes of tracks exclusive to Remastered like the Money Bin and Mount Vesuvius. Bosses are now extended and expanded upon. They initially start out pretty much like their original 8-bit counterparts, but then they share new attacks and new ways of beating them. For example, the Yeti boss now requires Scrooge to actually knock the ceiling down on top of it. The boss of the Amazon will now try to crush you with the walls and you have to hop up to a save point, and even Dracula Duck has been improved to using more attacks than just tossing a couple bats at you. It really adds an extra layer of challenge to the game, even if it's still pretty easy. So what do I think of this game? All in all, I give it a score of a 9 out of 10. Ducktales Remastered is such an amazing remake and is such a great update on this NES classic. Everything about it pays respect to the original whilst at the same time expanding on it in more ways than one. The cutscenes, while some may find them unneeded, really make the game feel like an episode of the show, and going as far as using the original voice actors of the original show shows how much the team behind it cared about the legacy. Even without all the fan service, as a game itself, it's still a damn fine ROM. I look forward to the next time I have to travel across the world with this Disney property and not any other. You know what? After playing Ducktales Remastered, I have a new appreciation for licensed games. Capcom managed to catch lightning and get a bottle of points, which isn't easy to do. Oh, even for licensed games, it's pretty hard. But, you know what? I have high hopes for them now. So you know what? I think I'm gonna give the Twilight game a try, because how bad can it really be? I was wrong!